All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And this week we are moving forward as we have been doing, continuing our celebration of a Black horror here in Black History Month. And we are getting all the way up to the year 2020 as we are going to be reviewing the movie Antebellum. Came out in 2020, like I said, starring Janelle Monáe. We've got a lot of thoughts. So we're just going to kind of jump into it here because if this movie is anything, right, it leaves you thinking, right? So it's got this incredible premise where you're trying to figure out if you're jumping through time, if it's like a previous life thing, a reincarnation movie. There's just a lot going on. And everybody was so excited about it. I remember all of the hype for this movie as it was getting ready to come out back in 2020. I mean, it was so much anticipation and so much hype. Does this movie deliver? Is it? I mean, what we will say here at the top, we did this one, and yes, it does kind of just barely inch up to that horror line. But I mean, did it scare you at all? Did it deliver on all the hype?
So. No.
Fair.
A very qualified no, I think. There's certain I think that this movie is terrifying.
Right.
It's not horror in the traditional sense. I definitely think it's more of a thriller than horror, but there's so much in it that is horrific. There's so much in it that is horrifying that I find scary to, I think, qualify as a horror movie. The issue, I think, is that there is this incredible premise. It's like I remember what I thought before the movie came out, and you were thinking reincarnation,
right?
I was thinking that there was some sort of time travel involved,
right?
Where maybe racist white dudes were able to open up wormholes and like transport modern day Black people to antebellum US,
right?
And so like they had this never ending like supply of slaves,
right? Like a pipeline,
right? Yeah, so like a new slave trade. And obviously this is an idea I had going into the movie. It's not that the movie suggested it at all by the trailer,
right?
But the trailer didn't really suggest too much. It was just like, here's a premise for a movie, right? There's modern day, there's the past, there's Janelle Monáe and all of it.
Yeah.
So I was very let down by the story. The acting is incredible. I will give it that. Acting is great. I think it's a well-made movie. But it's a movie that never really explores its premise very deeply. I think it's very on the nose. I think that it kind of doesn't really go anywhere.
Yes.
It kind of just like spins its tires in mud and stays exactly where it was at the beginning. And above it all is confusing.
Yes.
So it's confusing. And then there's all the questions that I have about the possibility of it at all. So I think for a movie that takes itself very seriously, you have to take it seriously, and you can't stop and say, well, we can just kind of, brush that off. I think a movie like Blackula that we did 2 weeks ago, that's a kind of movie that didn't take itself too seriously.
Right.
There was serious subject matter, but it approached it in a much more casual way. Same thing last week with Tales from the Hood.
Right.
But this takes itself very, very seriously. And because of it, I think it is the scariest of the bunch that we've done. But it also makes it one where you kind of have to approach it this way. How'd you feel?
So I'm absolutely with you in the fact that there's, as I was watching it, I was like, okay, this movie is horrific, like you said, but it's not traditional horror, and we have the talk off air all the time about, well, it's our show, and we can kind of define what makes a horror movie, and we've towed the line before with some things here and there. But it was so, yeah, I agree. It's definitely not necessarily a horror film. It is a film full of things that are horrific.
Mhm.
I think that, like I said, I had this idea going into it based on kind of what I had seen that, yeah, I was thinking it was going to be some sort of reincarnation type thing, that Janelle Monáe was playing a different character, but the same, like she was playing in two different timelines is what I thought was going to happen with this movie. And again, the movie is not at fault for what I went into it thinking it was going to be. So trying to figure that out as it went was weird, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that this movie kind of meandered, especially in the middle. When we get to story, there's a big chunk here where not only are you wondering what's going on, but you're wondering why any of it matters. When it gets to when it ends up in modern day, you start wondering those things. So I think that part of the problem is something that you said, is that while it is very, very serious subject matter, for a premise that is really super outlandish, right? I'm big on like I said last week, obviously old white men with money run the country.
Yeah.
So they can get away with a lot of things, but man, this is a big ask,
Mhm.
right? To just kind of suspend disbelief that much. And so I do think that it is very scary to think that something like this could happen. I just think that for an hour and 45 minutes, just not a lot got done here, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't extremely disappointing. It was just, I don't know, when it was over, I felt weird. And not just because because it was, like whenever you watch something about just obviously America's Greatest Shame, you always have that weird feeling afterwards. But
Right.
it wasn't that normal, like I just finished Glory and I feel weird,
Mhm.
like it was weird because I couldn't put my finger on what was good or what was bad. It was all just kind of mushed in there.
Mhm.
And so at 24 hours later, I can definitely say it did not live up to the hype. We've had movies like this before where the initial storyboard probably seemed like a really great idea, or the short story that they came up with
Mhm.
that they were going to turn into it, and then the looming shadow of having to turn this into a feature-length film, I think is where this movie kind of got bit in the ass.
Yeah.
And just trying to take what's an interesting and bizarre premise and turn it into a full movie. That's where it gets weird. And when we get into story, I'll talk more about that, because I think that if you had cut out the middle of this movie and just stuck with the beginning, like part 1 and part 3, then you could have told the same story, done it in 48, 50 minutes, and it been as effective, and possibly a little bit more shocking, and not had people going into it with these preconceived notions that were only bound to kind of upset them. You always have the same type of thing at this point where you go into a Shyamalan movie, right? So you're always wondering, oh, well, where's the twist going to be? What's he going to do this time? And so you go into these movies with an idea in your head, and regardless of whether or not it ends up being good, you have these moments where you're so disappointed in the fact that you felt led astray, even though they didn't actually do anything to do that to you, that it reflects upon the movie negatively. I remember the same thing happening with The Village. Now 20 years removed from the release of The Village. Now I can watch The Village and really like it. But when I first left The Village, I was like, this was dumb and not what I thought was going to happen, and I'm upset about that. So, and again, not Shyamalan or The Village's fault, just happened, and I think that's what happened here. Like, I had this idea in my head that I thought was going to make this really cool and bizarre premise. And then when that didn't play out, it was a letdown. And that's unfortunate because there is some good stuff here. And yeah, there is some really, really scary stuff here. And just some really unflinching looks at some of this stuff in a movie that you don't necessarily expect that from. So that part's cool. But there's it meanders, man. It wanders. It does circles. It just all of those different things I could say to point out that just not a lot gets done in an hour and 45 minutes here. And that I think is the most disappointing part.
It is unfortunate because I think that there's a lot to explore here. Right. Because you are talking about America's oldest sin.
Right.
And it's like people have written dissertations, books and books and books about this.
Right.
People go on and on every day, and we've still got stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
And in an hour and 45 minutes, all I kept thinking was, well, when's it going to happen?
Right.
And so that leads us into what we're calling the South Will Not Rise Again.
Love it.
Yeah, as two Southerners here, let's make that clear. The South will not rise again. So this is the area, the story, where like pretty unanimously critics found something wrong. And I think from what I've read, a lot of it has to do with what we're talking about. There's a lot to be said here that isn't said.
Right.
So, do you think that this is a scary story? Number one, and number two, does the story work? And if so, why? And if not, why?
So the storytelling mechanic here, when you start off they call it a reformer plantation, and Janelle Monáe is there, and she is Eden, and we get a very roots moment where she's being beaten and taught her new name and all of that, and so we're watching the horror play out as she's living. Then all of a sudden she wakes up and she's in modern day, I don't know, let's call it New York, right? And so. And she doesn't have the brand anymore because she got branded at one point. And so you're going, and so again, so I'm doing the, okay, so she's dreaming and she's remembering a previous life. And they continue to lead us down this. We eventually see her get kidnapped. She wakes up, and then you start to put it together to realize that the middle of this movie is actually a flashback, and that parts 1 and part 3 are a contiguous story. And so once I kind of, I at one point when I was watching this last night, I texted you, I was just like, what the fuck is going on? And then I texted you, I was like, 30 seconds later, I figured it out. Like, we're okay. And so once I kind of put all that together and I could kind of put that behind me, I was just looking at what we had here. And like I alluded to at the top, my biggest problem with the story here is the middle of this movie, I assume in an effort to establish how renowned Janelle Monáe's character of Veronica was, and how important she was to an activist movement. They spend so much time doing stuff like that this is where the movie gets absolutely nowhere. It takes so long for her to get kidnapped. And while some of that stuff is important, it's important for the reveal that we see that picture that her daughter gives us, and the little Skype interview she does with the lady who read her book. That stuff's all important, but it's just weird there in the middle. You're just left where nothing's happening. The middle of this movie, absolutely nothing's happening. Nothing that
and it's a big chunk of the movie.
And it's a big chunk, and nothing that has weight towards the end of the movie happens in this until the very last second of the middle of the movie. And that, I think, is this is why this is considered to be the movie's biggest flaw. You call it pacing, call it story, call it what you will. The middle of this movie is so stagnant, and you get all of these high points on things that could have been raised to be great points in the movie. And if your idea was to push these certain activist things and these certain belief structures, then don't just make them sound bites, because there were some great sound bites in there. There really are. The little speech she gives at the conference and talks about the stigma of being labeled as the angry black woman. And for fear of massacring her actual name, I'm going to call her Precious. She does a great job in bringing at least this much kind of levity to everything. But also,
a smile came on my face when I saw her. I was like, oh, there she is.
Exactly. And so, she gets in there and kind of does the thing, but also without her, this movie's exactly the same. So whether or not she matters is interesting. And you get introduced to a couple new characters, and it's just the middle of this movie, it falls apart so hard. Does it scare? The beginning scares. The ending scares. There's one part in the middle that is so just I don't even know the right word. The girl in the elevator. I don't even know. I don't know if she was. That was the moment where I was like, okay, maybe it is time travel. Like, what is this girl about? That part's scary, but then it's also unsettling that it adds to it. It equals nothing. Like, it never makes any sense in any way for all the loose ends that they went about tying up and making all of this make sense. Random pale girl on the elevator with the doll on a noose never equates to anything, which is odd.
Well, that is what's her name? Jenna Malone's character. That's her daughter.
Okay, maybe I just missed that.
And this is part of the problem with this movie, is that there is so much that is left unsaid.
Right.
There's so much that is unexplained. I think it's an inexcusable amount of explaining that needs to happen in this movie.
Yeah, and so I just, like I said, there's definitely some deeply disturbing things to be found in this movie, but it's just, this is where looking at the story and looking at the pacing and looking at the way everything came across, this is just definitely where the wheels come off, because too much of it just doesn't add up to anything that's going to make it worth a rewatch. It did keep my attention because I was kind of glued just trying to put the pieces together. But it's definitely not something where I'm like, well, now I want to rewatch it and see what I missed, because I saw it all. I really did. And it just doesn't all add. This is a movie where the whole is less than the sum of its parts.
That's a great way to put it. Because I was gonna call it Barbarian redo. Or Barbarian is redo of this,
right,
since this came out before, because I kept thinking that all day. I'm like, well, how do I explain how I feel about this movie?
Yeah, me too.
Now I think Barbarian takes the the completely outlandish premise to a totally different level,
right?
Because there's things in Barbarian that just do not make sense. What this movie needs is explanation. And in that 40-minute chunk or 50-minute chunk, however long it was very long.
It was
where
very long.
where all that was done was the very premise was set up. If you would have taken some time there to focus not so much on Janelle Monáe's character, on Veronica, thank you. I didn't want to call her Eden.
Yes.
Then focus on Jenna. This is my problem here. Number one, who's the villain?
Right.
Because it seems like the villain here is just the idea of racism.
Correct.
Right. And that's okay. However, that leaves us with these questions of, well, who's the one I got to pay attention to here?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I paying attention to all of them? But then the issue is that you don't really develop any of these villains well when you do that. So I don't really fear any of these people. To me, they're all the same. And it wasn't until the very end that I figured out that the general character was the senator.
Yeah.
That there's no mention of who this man is until the very end. It's a throwaway line.
Oh, no, Senator Denton.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, which one's the fucking senator?
Right.
Or is that just a character that he's playing? Like, I don't know. And because no backstory was given at all, when she's walking out finally, and you see, the whole the reenactment and all that going on, and it's then you see vote for Denton, owned by Senator whatever Denton. I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess one of those guys was, and I still didn't know whether it was Jack Houston's character or the other guy, Eric Lang. I didn't know. I had to look it up.
Yeah,
I assumed, but I wasn't sure because there's no explanation given. Right. And then who is Jenna Malone's father? Like, she mentions that
I was under the assumption that her father was Senator Denton.
Right.
And that's why he was so into her. That's why he was sleeping at her place and stuff, because she was the one he had to have. And it's just, like I said,
But why do I care? You haven't established this relationship at all. So you're throwing this out there. Why do I give a fuck?
Right. And you
haven't made it matter the entire movie. And now you're going to use this as like some sort of narrative driving force. It's not going to work. And that's the problem that this movie has, is that the narrative doesn't work unless you sit here and explain. And you had time to explain, but you threw in a story to set up the story because the premise is so outlandish. Right. So we agree. I think you and I agree with the message here that racism has not gone away.
Right.
That with enough power and influence, hateful, racist white men will continue to use you as slaves and think of you as slaves because they already do. Right. I agree with that message. But this is taking it a step forward. Not that people would do this, because I do think that people would do this given the chance.
I do too.
I think the plausibility of it, right? Like, we're not talking about some hidden island somewhere. We're talking about right smack in the middle of America,
Louisiana.
Right? Louisiana. And we're talking about like very notable people who have gone missing. Like, the amount of influence and power that you need to have, like a regular senator. And I say regular senator, I mean, there's 100 of these fuckers, right? And they're all very powerful. But some guy who is like maybe a junior senator, who doesn't sit on any committees, who isn't running for president, like, I have no idea how well connected this guy is. And I don't know that even the president of the United States could get away with something like this.
Yeah. I mean, every single one of us who is listening to this or watching this right now, then you're obviously doing it on some sort of smart device. And that device has access to Google Maps, Google Earth, right? And you can zoom in and you can see somebody's ass crack while they are bent over watering their flowers. But I'm supposed to believe that somehow somebody buried, like somebody put a plantation in the middle of their own property, by the way, because this is just set right off of a Civil War reenactment battleground
where people are going to,
where people
like,
are there.
You're selling tickets and saying, hey, come check this out.
Yeah. And so that, I think, that part was in a movie where everything was so on the nose and topical, and I'm supposed to buy in to how relevant this is. That part of the movie becomes so outlandish to me. Because like you said, do I have any problem believing that there are people who would like this? No, not at all. I have no problem believing that there are people with money who are, contrary to what our section here is called, believe the South will rise again and they'll get to live this antebellum life of glory where they own people, and that if they have the money, then they're going to do it just for a weekend. I mean, but a slavery fantasy camp in the middle of Louisiana, that's a stretch. And
we're not talking about grifters and people that are homeless, who sadly will likely no one will know that they're gone. The invisible people. We're talking about very notable people, and I know that this is why that middle segment exists, because we need to know that she was a mover.
Right.
We need to know that she was a game changer who was making things happen, because that's the kind of person who's dangerous to someone like the senator.
Yes.
So we have to understand that. But the thing is that if every single one of the people who was being held as a slave on this plantation was one of these notable people, how the fuck have they gotten away with this? We're not talking about one person. We're talking about
full plantation.
Yeah. That's a lot of fucking people.
Yeah. And that is the thing, right? Where, I mean, because this is, when you go back to the beginning and you watch, so she was on this thing for 6 weeks. And so, I mean, in 6 weeks, they can turn over a lot of ground. And granted, Louisiana was a far stretch from where she went missing. So maybe they weren't looking that far, but you're right. She's not the first one to be down there. And I mean, when we say she's a mover, I mean, she was a noted author. She was on CNN debating active politicians and things of that nature. And so you're right. It would have been like a nationwide manhunt. There's no way they'd have been like, well, we can't find her in this city, so let's move on. And, you were talking about just no discovery, no investigation into who Senator Denton is. And I do think that is the cardinal sin of this movie, because I unashamedly love the Hostel movies. I really do. And I think that the movies, as the two of them, benefit greatly from something that was done in the second one, which is where they actually explored the network of wealth that allowed for this to happen. This movie could have used a little less dinner chat among friends and a little more, here's Senator Denton in some sort of clandestine meeting. And now, even if you had and I think that that's also part of the pacing here, because if you'd done it in that middle point, it would have ruined the reveal later on of realizing that was taking place in modern day. I do understand that, but chop it up a little bit better. Get us back to the plantation sooner. Then give us a little bit more than random cell phone when you think everything going on is in the 1800s. And give us a little bit of, okay, well, here's some people talking about this. Here's who Jenna Malone is. And here's why, here's where she's done this before. Just something. Because that, you're right. When they wanted us to hate Jenna Malone because she was just a bitch when she would talk to Veronica. But I mean, yeah, sure, she was bitchy. And then, yeah, we saw her kidnap her. Okay, cool. She becomes the villain, but like, flesh her out, man. Give me a reason that she's abducting some of these people. Let me see some of the behind the scenes, because that's what this is missing in the plausibility of wondering how this could possibly work.
That was another thing that really irked me. The scene where she breaks into the hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
What was the point?
Yeah, don't know. Don't know.
Because it
Like-
seems almost like she's going to do something
Right.
to
Other
make
than
the
just piss in
abduction
her
happen.
bathroom.
Right. So, she pisses in the toilet, she puts on the lipstick, she removes a strand of hair and places it on the bed. Like, I think, okay, there's some sort of ritual going on here.
Right.
Right. This is how, and at this point in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is how they're going to get her.
Right.
To like be transported to the past. I don't fucking know. But in my head, I'm thinking like there's going to be a reveal here. And there wasn't. There was nothing. There was no point to that happening. Like, why is the little girl anywhere near there? Right.
Right.
And is she actually Jenna Malone's daughter? Like, I'm realizing now, like, who the fuck is she?
Exactly. Like that whole thing, just that whole sequence was, you're right, because it was the stairway to nowhere.
Mhm.
Right. It was great for building tension,
Right.
but how good is tension without release?
Mhm.
Right. You can go at it for an hour, but if you never get that one sparkling moment at the end, then all you did was shake hands with a senator for an hour for no reason. Right.
Right.
So,
And there is no real relationship built between them. So when
Right.
that final confrontation happens, it's a Skype conversation that they had for all of 2 minutes.
Mhm.
There's knowing that she was the one driving the car,
Right.
and then there's the meeting at the end. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So like to me, it's like, if she's the big bad, which obviously she's not because it's the senator, which might be her dad, right?
Might be.
But if she's the one that we've been looking at as the big bad for her, right? For Vanessa, sorry. Did I get that right?
No,
the first
Veronica.
time?
You
It
were
was
the first time.
Veronica, yeah. Why?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's where all of this, like I said, that is where absolutely all of this falls apart. It just gets so weird there,
Mhm.
with stuff that doesn't play, that doesn't play out, with stuff that's just kind of thrust upon you all of the sudden. Because there is some shock value in that moment when he answers his phone and you
Mhm.
are convinced that you're on a plantation, a pre-Civil War plantation. There is that moment where that's when your head starts spinning. But then so much of that stuff in the middle just equates to nothing. And you're right, we end up back in this same type of thing that put us on the fence about, well, not on the fence, just put us firmly in the camp of not liking Barbarian, because there's so much that either doesn't play out or just is too far beyond belief that it sucks you out and you
Yeah.
can't appreciate it. And like I said, there's a great short story in here that I think is where this movie started. Just this idea of, man, what if there was a group of people, rich and powerful and white enough that they could live out this plantation fantasy camp life.
Mhm.
And then what if they're it's not just like you said, drifters. What if they're taking people of power who, not only because they want to live this life, but because they want to exercise their power over people who are a threat to them. Yes, all of these are great concepts. They are just concepts that are poorly executed in this movie.
Well, and I think that it boils down to movies that say something about important issues are great movies. But you have to find a smart way of saying it.
Right.
And I don't think that this does. I think that this is a movie that is about something and doesn't say anything with it.
There we go.
It never finds the words to say the message that it has. Like, I've had great teachers in my life that couldn't give me a lesson.
Right.
They were very knowledgeable people. They were super smart, and they couldn't teach a lesson. So in the end, were they really good teachers? No. Like, there's a great message here. There's a great story here even, but it wasn't told.
Yeah. And that you're right. it's one thing to just headline something, be like, "Wow, did you see about that?" But when that's all you do, right? When somebody's like, I had this happened to me at work actually recently. Somebody's like, "Oh man, did you see about that train that derailed?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's wild."
Yeah.
And then started trying to talk about it, and they're like, "Oh, well, I don't really know anything about it," and just saw that it was bad. Okay, yeah, but there's more to it,
Right.
than just the fact that it's that type of thing. It's these people going, man, look at this idea of how crazy this is. Yeah. So you're gonna tell me why it's awful? Or I mean, I just fill in all those blanks myself because I can. I mean, I
Right.
can look at this and go, this is terrible. Why would anybody do this? But also when I watch a movie, that's your job. You're the storyteller. I'm
Right.
not supposed to have to fill in quite so many blanks.
Yeah.
But I think that one thing that we can definitely kind of attribute to this movie as being very strong is we do get some excellent performances in this movie. So in a segment we're going to call activists and aggressors, I mean, everywhere you go in this movie, somebody's putting on a good performance. So who stands out for you?
I mean, this is obviously Janelle Monáe's movie.
Right.
She carries this movie, and there are great performances in this movie. But this is her show. She does a great job of playing this ridiculously intelligent, ridiculously successful woman who has to survive in this
Yes.
environment. And the interactions that we get between her and Kiersey Clemens, who plays Julia, are, I think, fantastic because we see how self-preservation takes over. And Kiersey Clemens' character of Julia can't see beyond what we need to get out of here now.
Right.
And Veronica's thinking, well, we need to stop what's going on. So it's not as simple as just we need to escape. It's we need to escape, and we need to make sure that we escape alive. We need to make sure that we escape and we can tell someone. So we need some sort of proof. We need something that we can take with us here. So that Julia tells her something. She says, do you think you're strong because you're silent? And it's a great line, I think, because we're often told that like you don't show pain and you don't show
Right.
emotion, you don't show the hurt. And so silence in a way can make you strong. But then we're also told, you see something, you say something. And so speaking up can also be strong. And I do think that affects her, particularly when she sees that her character has hanged herself.
Right.
It's like, fuck, I could have maybe sped up my timeline and I didn't. And look at what it got us. But it's not her fault. And her strength shines through whether she is being more reserved and in that self-preservation mode, or on a stage giving an incredible speech to a crowd of people that are there to see her move mountains. So her character is incredible. But if I had to mention anyone else, it would probably be I think it's pronounced, because I am going to make an attempt. I think it's pronounced Gabori Sibide. I think that's how you say her name. Precious, right?
I would have massacred it because I don't know that I would have said it like that. So I'm going to say you're right, and I'm glad I called her Precious.
She's hysterical.
And she's spectacular.
She's an incredible actress, and she can do funny really, really well. But she has this way of like calling attention to the seriousness of certain things, but she did a lot in Precious. She was also fantastic in a very mediocre season of American Horror Story.
Yes, and Coven.
Coven, yeah. And she's awesome The moment that she walks into that room, she's like, "Why the fuck is this so hot in here?"
Yes, and
She's like, "Oh,
immediately starts banging on
I'm
the
trying a new
thermostat.
Bikram, right?" And then she just starts tapping away, dropping the temperature. The whole, how much do I owe you for this coffee? She was like, it was $74.95.
Yeah.
Like she throws out like a very random number, and it's like, I might believe that like artisanal coffee might cost that much. I don't know, right? And just the way that she carries herself, the way that she speaks, she is so sure of herself. I love the scene. There's two moments with her that for me really shine. It's when they go to the restaurant and they're going to sit them in this like tiny little table that's off to the side, and it's very clear that it's because of their race, right?
Yeah.
It's two black girls and a white girl, and they're like, well, you're gonna sit in the back here. And she's like, no, we're not. And she just fucking lets her have it.
Okay, Becky.
Yes. Oh my God, that was fantastic. And then when the guy is hitting on her, right? I'm a guy, right? So like I don't think the way a woman thinks. I try to get in the head of women to understand, and I totally understood where it was that she was coming from, where it was like, you think that you're paying me a compliment by buying me a drink, but you didn't fucking bother to look at what we were drinking. Like you're throwing this fruity shit at me when you clearly see that we're drinking champagne. We're obviously celebrating. Like, what the fuck? And then I love that at the end, after she's made this guy feel as tall as a fucking little Star Wars action figure, she says, "And here's my card because you can call me and this will happen."
This will happen. Yeah. Yeah. She was definitely, I do love the way that some of the characters in this movie were very obviously created to subvert some of the stereotypes that are mentioned in like her speech.
Mhm.
When she is talking to them about getting the better table, she approaches that line of running the risk of being considered the angry black woman, but doesn't care because she's gonna get her way because she knows she's been wronged.
Right.
And so she takes that idea that that Veronica mentioned in her talk, and she owns it, and she doesn't get angry. She is assertive.
Mhm.
And so it completely subverts that idea of just anytime somebody complains about something, then it's because they're bitchy or because they're angry or whatever. And she does it in a way where she lets you know she's going to get her way, and you don't get a chance to talk back. Here's what's happening, and that's just how it's going to be. And so I do think that she did a spectacular job, and she was a great foil to this character of Veronica, who was all business. She cared about her work, and she cared about her family, and that was it. And because her work was for the betterment of her family. And so I think that the two of them were spectacular together. We've or I guess not on this podcast because we didn't do Glass Onion. We just talked about Janelle Monáe texting after we both watched Glass Onion. And I mean, I was talking to one person at work today, and they were like, "Oh, what'd you think of it?" And I was like, "I'm still trying to figure that part out, but I can only complain so much when I get to watch Janelle Monáe for an hour and 45 minutes, right? There's only so much complaining there to be done. But
I'm not mad if she's on screen.
Correct.
Yeah.
She did a great job, though, because especially once you realize how the timeline works and you're seeing that she's not just playing a regular broken woman who's become a slave, when you find out that it's the same person. And so you go back to the beginning of the movie and you see how defiant she is at the beginning, refusing to say her new name and everything she's gone through. And then you see her become this appearingly meek, subdued, submissive person. You see the depth that she has as an actress, and she does continue to astound. I've always been impressed with her music, and now I will say, after watching this in Glass Onion, I continue to be impressed with her acting. She did a spectacular job. I love how she was very professional in everything she did, even when she was on that Skype call where she was just outwardly insulted. Jenna Malone drops that kind of, I was surprised at how articulate you were.
Yeah,
which is always one of those, like,
it's
really
all those
just
those
super
microaggression
things.
terms that you hear
Yes.
about all the time. She uses them all, and man, they fucking stab like needles.
Yes, and she handles it all with grace, and you watch all that, and she did all of that while also portraying. You could see on her face how angry she was, and you could see through her acting, you could see the process of her internalizing it and then not spewing the bile back out. And that was super impressive. So she was the standout. Absolutely incredible. I really, really wish that we had gotten more of Elizabeth, which is Jenna Malone's character.
Right.
Because I do think that there is the framework for a great villain there. I do think that that there's the idea of her being the one who runs this thing and does the recruiting and all those things that we just got smatterings of in one rant at the end. If we had seen any development as to why she was like this, or why she thought this was okay or an acceptable thing, or what sort of underground, QAnon, whatever type movement that she was involved in that made her want to be like this, then I think that there's a character there that you could have fleshed out, and she could have been more than a couple of digs and a really shocking death.
Yeah.
As comical as it may have been. So I do wish that there had been more of her, because she's an interesting actress. Jenna Malone is somebody who always kind of pops up and catches your eye, but she always seems to just be in stuff where she doesn't get a chance to shine. I love the movie Sucker Punch. I do. It's ridiculous.
It's kind of a
but it's the same type of thing in Sucker Punch. There's a great character there. She just wasn't given a chance to flesh it out, but she did her damnedest with what she had. And I believe she was Sweet Pea in that. And so I wish that there had been more of her. I wish that through that we had gotten some background on Senator Denton. But again, that's a story thing. But as far as acting goes, I do think that the people who were in this shined with what they were given. That in the very beginning, that scene with the guy Daniel, who was the grown-up version of Eddard Stark in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was weird.
And that's all I could see him as. But he did an amazing job of going from meek dude who gets razzed by his buddy at dinner to guy who just completely flips out and smacks the girl around and kicks her in the stomach and all that. That 0 to 100 that he pulled was impressive. So even those guys that just got those small parts like that, man, the one dude who just kind of like ran, Jack Hudson was Jasper, the guy who seemed to be the foreman, I guess.
Yeah, what exactly was he? I don't know. He was great on Boardwalk Empire.
Yes, he was. But again, like, why is this a thing for you? And so I do think that everybody did the best with what they were given. I just don't think that everybody was given the opportunity to flesh out their characters as much as Veronica and Dawn were fleshed out. I think that we got a really good feel for exactly who both of those women were, and that there was nothing was going to change that. I think that everybody else was a good two-dimensional version of what could have been a great character.
That's I think a fair assessment. And I think because we never really focus too much on any one character, the ones that we do focus on do a fine job.
Yeah.
that kind of leads us into the another area that I think is something of a positive here. So the technical side of this, which I'm calling Antebellum period, is this is a freshman attempt
Yes.
by Gerard Bush and Christopher Renz, I think is his name.
Yes.
Um, I think this is just me. I'm about to ask you now that that there is some talent here. Um, is there anything that stands out to you as from a filmmaking perspective that you can say either good or bad? Obviously, aside from because they wrote the script too. So
Yeah.
aside from story, is there anything here, good or bad, that shines or doesn't?
Yeah, this is absolutely the brightest spot in this movie is the technical aspects. The one part of this that I rewatched was that opening scene where for I forget exactly how long, I didn't write it down, but there is one long shot at the
Yeah,
beginning of this that's
very impressive.
beautifully done and does 100% establish in the beginning that this is a period piece, and the shock value that comes with finding out that it's not is sold by how good they are at that opening third of the movie. There is just the music and things that are picked at the beginning are just phenomenal. I love when we're getting this big sweeping shot and we see the Confederate soldiers, as we're led to believe they are at the beginning, separating that couple, and we get those great slow motion shots of the guy in the collar with the bells on it and stuff, so he can't try to get away, and his wife or girlfriend or whatever running. All of that stuff is just beautifully done and sets the tone very early on for something that is going to be tragic and is going to be hard to watch. I mean, this is absolutely wonderful at that if they had kept that tone. Right? The problem comes in with how hard that tonal shift is into that middle part when suddenly none of it seems that serious. And then suddenly we're thrust back into it. All of the stuff that's on the plantation, I think, is where this movie shines. And I think that we get some really great shots. I love the idea of having her repeatedly over and over again, knowing exactly where to step to make these moves so the floorboards don't creak, greasing the hinges. All of those things make for great storytelling because it was obvious right away that one, people had tried to escape, and two, she had a plan to escape. She just needed the right moment.
Right.
And all of that, those are blanks I don't mind filling in because you gave me the pieces.
Right.
But you didn't have to spoon feed it to me. That stuff was really well done. I think that there are a lot of really good transitions, a lot of great camera work. The camera work in this is absolutely, I mean, it's just amazing. The scene we were talking about where Elizabeth goes into her suite, while ultimately nothing comes of that. The shots that we get where you like we said, the first thing we see is that she's peeing in there. And so, but we get that shot where you never see her all the way up. So you assume it's her, but you don't know. And she's messing with the lipstick and all that. When she's sitting on the bed, she's still silhouetted just enough.
The lighting is so perfect in that scene.
Yeah. And so all of that stuff is what really kind of kept me sucked in here. All of the technical aspects of this movie, I think, were very, very well done. That is where I kept finding myself impressed. In the scene where she gets kidnapped, they do this there's this really chaotic camera work where you're right in the car with her and you're watching her struggling, and then you're seeing from right outside the car and you see her heel kicking up on the window. You can see the shot where you find out that she's actually just right there next to her friend
Yeah.
before that car turns off. She's 4 feet from him, fighting for her life. And they don't notice because they're busy jamming out with their Uber driver, who's a real Uber driver, you know?
Right.
And so you get all of that stuff presents a very, very beautiful movie.
I agree. There is vision here. These are two men who have a clear vision of what this movie should look like, and it's a very, I think, accurate depiction. At least from everything that I've read and I've seen, I've taken tours of many different historical sites throughout the country, some of them in the South. So I've seen some of these places, and this is really accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, this, it's not really a soundstage. They built a set that is 100% accurate to what we would have seen, and that's part of what makes it so scary, is that this feels like, I was convinced that they were in antebellum era South.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
that's where they were. So much so that when it wasn't until the senator goes to answer his cell phone that I was like, wait, what the fuck is actually going on here?
Yeah.
Because I was convinced somehow that she had been transported back there.
And I was, the cell phone, while it was the big turning point, it wasn't until the plane flew over that I paused it and I was like, okay,
So
now
they
I'm
are
100%
in modern time.
sure. Yeah, the cell phone still had me going, wait a minute. Okay, no, is she, I'm still wondering, is she still dreaming? Is
did he take the cell phone back in time?
Yeah, exactly.
Too? And then I'm like, wait, but then there's no cell towers.
Yeah, I did the same, where it was just like, when I saw the cell phone, at that point, I was still 50-50 on whether they were what exactly was going on. Civil War South.
Yes, there was confusion there, I think, but man, the costuming was incredible. I think the characters that they wrote were particularly good. Now, obviously, once you find out what exactly is going on, it does leave you with lots of questions. But these Southern versions of these guys, these Old South versions of these people, the characters that they're playing are, I think, well written. They're not well written. They're exactly what they need to be. They're racist old white men, right? And I think that they gave enough of them something to do where I was convinced. I was 100% sucked into this old Southern plantation thing. And then, like you said, cinematography. The cinematographer is a guy by the name of Pedro Luque, and he has.
I didn't say it on purpose because I was like, Dave's gonna say it better.
Yeah. Well, he's from Uruguay, so Latino dude, but man, he hasn't worked on much that I know. From what I know, he did Don't Breathe, which had great cinematography.
Yeah.
Was a great fucking movie. And The Girl in the Spider's Web, which I didn't like as much as The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but again, it was beautiful, beautiful to look at. So he's very consistent. To me, that was one of those things. There were some shots there, the one that you see in the background if you're watching live, of Janelle Monáe having just burnt these guys in the incinerator. What a fucking shot. What a beautifully lit shot, masterfully lit shot. The framing is perfect. It's gorgeous. And that opening shot, like you say, rivals the the famous Goodfellas shot.
Yeah.
Where starts on the street, goes through the alley and through the kitchen out. It's one of, I think, the great extended take shots in cinema. That's not easy to do. That's really tough.
I am always amazed by long shots, and I'm always kind of on the lookout for them, to the point that if I'm about 90 seconds, 2 minutes into a shot, and I start to wonder, like, wait, have I seen a cut? I will rewind and then go back and see, because I want to make sure that it is. And Dunkirk had an amazing one too. But I'm just always floored by the freakish amount of planning that goes into something like that. The pilot of the Battlestar Galactica remake had a really long shot, and there were just, in all of these things, there's always so many things that could go wrong. And I can't imagine being 98% of the way through the shot and somebody slips and you just got to reset it all. Especially the one I'm talking about in Dunkirk. That one involves explosions.
Right.
And so
sometimes it is like a one and done.
Yeah. And so that I thought was really good. I did love once you're sure that this is in modern day, I did love the dig at the modern racist conservative, where the two drunk guys are talking to each other, and one of them calls the other one a cuck, and he calls him a snowflake. Yeah. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, no, I'm in there now. I understand that this is modern time. But it was fun. That was a fun moment. It was like, okay, we hope you've got it. But if you don't, look, here's some things that people say now.
Right.
And so there were some decisions here that present very beautifully. And, that is something we always end up coming back to on so many of these new movies, is when form starts to outshine function.
Yeah.
We kind of went through the same thing with Deep House, where it's like, this is amazing that they did all of this.
Yeah.
But what was the story they were telling? Yeah. Like, what does any of it matter? And I think we should do something. Again, beautifully shot. And then you just kind of go, but why? So I think that we get to that point with this movie. And like you said, they're also the writers, and they did deliver some stellar lines in there. I did get the hardest I laughed in all of this, and it was a much needed moment of levity when Janelle Monáe comes out of the elevator and she's in that green dress, and Precious looks at her and she says, "Damn, I said look nice, not murder these hoes." I was like, okay. Like stuff like that, where it's like, okay, yes, this movie needed that breath of fresh air at this point. And so for the pacing missteps that they had, just the insertion of her into that middle section did manage to keep you mostly engaged. So I've got to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
We're looking at the technical aspects. We've talked about the story, and we've talked about the writing and the cinematography. I think that now, since we are looking at this as a horror movie, and we've said that it's full of horrific stuff, I think that we would be remiss to not address this idea of this movie having some sort of monster in it, right? So, when you're looking at this, we're going to call it the hate monster, because it's hard to say that Senator Dutton or Elizabeth is the big bad in this movie, because they're both so underdeveloped. So we have to look at this idea of racism being prevalent to this day as the monster in this movie. So how does that work? Not just in this movie, but how does the idea of the big bad being a concept work for you?
So I think in theory it works well, because that is what the movie's about. The movie's about racism, that racism has never gone away, and that if it does go away, it's going to take an awful lot, because at the very heart of America is racism, and at the very top of America is racism. So that's a very scary concept. It's a very scary idea, and it's a very realistic idea. So I'm on board with that in theory. The problem is that I think that the way that Antebellum chose to explore that as the antagonist in the movie left it so that none of these villains that I'm supposed to care about do I end up caring about.
Right.
I don't give a fuck about Senator Denton. I don't even know who the fuck he is until the end of the movie. He's just one of the people in charge there. Like, who
Right.
actually is in charge there? Because it seems like it might be him, but then it seems like it might be Jack Houston's character. But then it also seems like it might be Jenna Malone's character. So who actually is in charge there? There's a hierarchy that doesn't really make an awful lot of sense to me. And then also, like, why do I care?
Right.
At the end of the movie, you know, why do I care about these characters? How should I care about these characters? You know, all that, you know, who, what, when, where, why, you know, those W's, they all need to be answered. Because I know what the concept is. I know what the idea is, but now tell me why I care about these characters doing this. Because in the end, I mean, it was almost like torture porn.
Yeah.
In that, like, yeah, you've shown me you've shown me the horrors of slavery, but why? Because I don't think the point of the movie is to say that the stuff that was going on back then was bad. That's kind of a given.
Right.
I think that they're trying to say something about modern day, but you don't really end up saying it. At least not with the villains the way that they're laid out. So as far as the idea of it, yeah, I mean, it's plenty scary. It's a great villain, racism, because it's a very real villain. But as far as the actual characters, the villainous characters, I don't give a fuck about them.
Right.
And it is directly the movie's fault for setting it up that way.
Yeah, this concept that we're presented with here, which is, like you said, racism hasn't gone away. Okay, yeah, that's awful. But the package that it was presented in is mostly the idea that racism was terrible. And I think that slavery was bad. And I, like you said, these things aren't in question. Nobody is doubting the fact that slavery was awful. And so if you want the idea of this, if you want the monster to be this idea that modern racism is still terrible, and that there are people who want to do these things, then you have to, like you said, you have to give me villains that are more than just bad guys. Mm-hmm. There's you had a quote a couple weeks ago about Blackula that was spectacular, which is, I always knew Dracula was a bad guy, but I'm realizing that he was a monster.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is what's wrong here. I think that to drive home the idea that there are still villains in this world who want to live this life, then you have to create those people as monsters. You've got to make me you've got to make me care about them while not caring if awful things happen to them. I want to know why they're like this. And just taking the idea of racism is still this bad, or and there are still people who want this way of life, is great, like you said, in theory. But theory and execution are two very, very different things. You know, when I was a kid, I had this idea that what if we could just talk to our computers and it would type for us? Yeah, that was a great idea when I was in the third grade. But I was 8 and I wasn't going to make it happen. If I'd attempted to, it would have been miserable. Dragon went on, and now everybody can do talk to text, right?
Right.
And so great ideas are one thing. The ability to execute them in a way that creates something that people like is a whole different thing. And that's where the disconnect is. It's just the fact that we had a really good idea. We had a remarkably flawed execution. of said idea. And that is the biggest problem here, because there, like I said, there is a framework for Elizabeth to be an awful human being and a great bad guy. There, all we know about Senator Denton is this is a guy who he's racist and he likes rape, right? That's all we've got. And yes, those are two terrible. I'm going on record here for Shiver to let you know that if you're a racist who enjoys raping people, we think you're an awful human being. That is our official
not exactly
stance.
a bold statement.
Yeah. But like you said, it's not a bold statement. It's those are easy ways to make me dislike somebody.
Right.
Make me understand that he feels like these things are okay because he's in a position of power, which is kind of what the assumption that I draw. But make me see that. Let me know a little bit sooner before he's dead that this guy was a senator and that he actively did this because he had the money and the power to be above the law. Those are the types of things that make monsters. And that's what this movie needed. It needed monsters. If for all of the strength that Veronica put forward to survive this for 6 weeks and get out and rescue the people who are still there, she is deserving of a counterpart that is equally evil as she is good and determined. And that's Hercules would have just been a dude who was strong if he didn't have the Hydra to take out. That's yes, what we had was a very strong character there. But if you would establish for me how powerful Senator Denton and Elizabeth are, then it would have made it an even grander victory for her to escape. If you had established for me that Elizabeth was this child of wealth and power who had never known what living in living within the law was like, it would have been that much more satisfying to watch her head bang off of that Robert E. Lee statue, because I would have been like, yeah, you get what you deserve, which I got that a little bit, but man, if I had known just a little bit more about why she thought she was so above the law, that would have been a remarkably satisfying death. And I think that's, again, we just keep going back to it, but that's this movie's greatest blunder, is just never establishing a depth of evil other than just racism, slavery, bad. Yeah, I got that, man. I
went into this with that knowledge.
Right, exactly.
So you don't need to convince me of that. It's a given. It's kind of how I felt during The Last Jedi. Because I mean, I get it. War is bad, and the good guys do bad things all the time. But you don't really say anything about it. Like you make the claim,
right?
And it's like, no, I'm with you. So what's your point?
Yeah,
right. It's like a straw man argument.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm here. I'm with you. I'm watching the movie because I bought into this premise. Do something with it.
Correct.
And it's I think that's really where it falls short. The story and this, I think, are so tied together, which is unfortunate because there is so much potential here. I would love to see, I mean, even Bush and Renz take another shot at this, but have someone really explore these horrors in different ways. I mean, fuck, let Stephen King take a stab at it.
Right.
He'll take it too far. He'll take it in the other direction where now it's like, okay, hang on, we got to reel you in.
Yes, we will get less than 40 pages of tax returns explaining why he's so rich. But
yeah, and then 5 years after it's published, he's gonna say that there's that one scene where he took it too far.
Yeah, exactly.
Every one of his books has it. So I think that there is vision here. Unfortunately, I think that you can't see the forest for the trees.
There it is.
There's just there's a great idea that doesn't get fleshed out.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with nothing but ratings, which is what we're gonna do. And there is only one
There was.
that I threw out, and Daniel didn't fight me on it. So we're gonna go with it. So Daniel, out of a possible 5 anachronistic cell phones, how many anachronistic cell phones do you give this?
So, just for anybody maybe listening and not know what anachronistic means, it means something that seems out of place for
Mhm.
the time or the period. So
The more
I,
you know.
yeah, exactly. Right. I've been dreading this moment
I'm so glad you're going first.
like all day because, like we've said, there are some great performances here. There is some beautiful shots here. But there are also underdeveloped villains. There's a story that drags in the middle. And so the ultimate question that I'm gonna boil this one down to is if somebody were to ask me, hey, is Antebellum worth a watch? Then I think ultimately I would say yes. I would say there is a movie here worth watching. And then I want to talk to you about it. I want people to watch this movie, and then I want them to discuss it with me because I do want to know what other people think about this. So would I recommend it? Yes. Do I ever plan on going back and watching it again? No. So I think that that's going to kind of firmly put it in that 3 anachronistic cell phones territory. I've seen it. I've enjoyed what it presented that was good. I've complained about what it presented that I didn't like. But if somebody were to ask, is it worth watching? Yeah, it's worth watching because there is stuff here that's good. And there is an idea that is worth absorbing and seeing what you think of it. And there is some good discussion material here, even if that discussion does come in the form of, well, what do you think? Like what? Well, that thing I talked about having to fill in your own blanks. Now I want people to watch it, and I want them to fill in blanks and tell me where they stand about it. So yeah, I'm gonna sit just firmly there at 3 anachronistic cell phones on this one. How about you?
I waffled back and forth over the last 24 hours. I didn't know if I was going to go as low as 2. I wasn't going to go lower than that because I do think it's a really well made movie. And I wasn't going to go higher than 3. But I was like, okay, is it going to be 2, 2.5, or 3? And I think I'm with you. I think that there is value here, and its value is in discussion.
Right.
And there is artistic value too, because there are certain frames that are paintings.
Yes.
They're gorgeous, particularly at the end as Veronica's riding through the reenactment scene.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And it's terrifying, and it's sad, and it's victorious. It's all those things all at the same time. I got whispers of the no man's land scene in Wonder Woman there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like about this movie if you want to see it. Unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of drawbacks too. I think that there's a great message here that is yet to be explored. And I'm with you. I think that if someone were to ask me, should I watch it? I would tell them it's worth watching it once.
Right.
Because you will see all of the artistic value. You will see what it is that that Bush and Renz are trying to say. And then we'll have a conversation afterwards, where I will inevitably end up getting upset that it's impossible for it to have happened. Which is why I can't go 3.5.
Right.
So 3, and we're right there, in the same ballpark. 3 anachronistic cell phones for Antebellum.
So there you have it. No math to be had today. We're going to sit solidly Shiver
I like
review of Antebellum at 3 anachronistic cell phones. So if you're listening and you want to chime in, let us know what you think. Because like Dave said, the value of this movie is in discussion. You can find us all over the internet. If you head to shiverpod.com, you will find links to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as our YouTube. We are also at ShiverPod on all of those things. So if you want to let us know what you think about this one, if you think we screwed something up, if you're mad at me for just calling her Precious rather than massacring her name, hey, we want to hear it all. So make sure you hit us up on all the social media. We try to keep the memes. We try to let you know what's out there. I'm trying to get better about making videos to put up. Recently dropped a video from our Blackula episode where we had Carl J. Grasso on Mutilator.
That was great. I like that.
And so trying to keep that up. We're not on TikTok because we're old. I mean, sorry. Yeah. It is what it is, right? But find us on all those others. We're at ShiverPod. You can email us at shiverpod@gmail.com if that's how you want to communicate. We would love to hear from you. We've got some great ideas for some stuff coming out in March. And next week, we are going to be wrapping up Black History Month. Tell them how, Dave.
With Jordan Peele's latest film, Nope. We went back and forth on which one to do. We definitely wanted to get a Jordan Peele movie in here as we're huge fans of his. And Get Out's been, talked about, to death. Us has been talked about to death. So let's do Nope.
Yeah, let's help throw that last shovel of dirt on Nope while we're at it. We're gonna strike while the iron's hot. That movie just came out last year.
Right. Almost a year ago. Crazy.
Yeah.
So there you have it. We'll be here next week, and we'll be here the week after that, and the week after that. Dropping episodes weekly. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.